And welcome back into Open Line. I'm Chuck Long here with attorney Kevin Kennedy from the Kennedy Law Firm. That's 35 years of experience throughout Tennessee, one of the top law firms in Tennessee. Every time Kevin's here, like I said, it's always an education for me. I learn a lot about the legal system, and I know you do too, whether it's your personal question or you're just listening, you're watching this evening, someone asks a question and you're thinking, I was wondering about that myself. Yeah. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to go right back to the lines, find out what is on the viewer's mind this evening. Patricia, what do you have a question, or do you have a question or a comment for Kevin?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
I have a timeshare, and I'm 76 years old, and I'm getting too old and to travel. It's in Florida, and I'd like to get rid of it, but I've got so many people calling, and they rip old people off because we don't know, the process of being able to get rid of it properly.
Yes, ma'am. Well, your situation, I bet you there's 10,000 that's listening tonight that have gotten into a timeshare, and also they're getting elderly and they like to get out, and the fees just keep going up, and the guy that sold it to you is no longer there. Even the owners who originally had this are no longer there. And so what I would suggest is that you talk to a private lawyer, and there's some things you can do to write some letters and try to get a release. Sometimes they'll say, well, if you'll just sign the deed back to us, that'll be it. Well, we've heard of people that sign the deed and then they're still not. So they've given up all their rights, but they're still under an obligation for the note. Well, that's not fair. So you need to make sure, and I say this all the time, a good understanding keeps down a misunderstanding. So I would get a lawyer to help me try to get out of that.
And thank you for your call, Patricia. We appreciate it. And Kevin, why does it seem like people tend to have problems with timeshare? Because you hear it more and more and more.
Yes. Well, the real world is people that got into it originally thought, we're going to make so much money, and it gets to great salesmen, great marketing, and it's a lot of hype, and all of a sudden, guess what? We didn't have the time, leisure to vacation, and so we've made a decision that we've committed to too much. And so for the owners, it was a good deal at the time, and if you used it a lot, it would still be a good deal now. But the reality is most people don't get to use all, and then they come back and say, I want out.
Right, right. One of the things that always interests me too with the legal profession and just the legal world in general is people often think, should I get a lawyer, should I not get a lawyer? But a lot of times people find, or I would say most of the time, and this is what I've learned, is it's more expensive not to have a lawyer.
Tell it.
Yeah.
It's so true. I remember my pastor, he's one of the greatest men of my life, and he said, well, Kevin, don't you get it in writing? I said, Raj, we've got it in writing. But what happens is that people won't honor their contract. I knew a big businessman. He made a lot of big deals, really wealthy. And he said, well, I've just decided I'm not going to pay them. Let them sue me. Because he was prepared to turn his lawyers loose, which, I don't like that kind of business, but there are people out here who do business that way.
Well, and that's one of the things that's always good to know. The other thing is, I think when people are figuring out, whether I go to a lawyer or not, one of the things, and you've underlined this many times in the past, is the law is complicated, and the lawyer is the person that understands how complicated.
And the truth is, it's so complicated, even with a lawyer. There's always so much room for interpretation. And so again, if you're representing the plaintiff, you're trying to protect your client. If you're representing the defendant, you're trying to protect. And one of the things about some of the most skilled judges I have ever seen in their rulings, they would go down the list, well, he's right. Then they go down the list, he's right. So they're putting all this on the scales of justice. If it's a civil case, it's by the preponderance of the evidence. That means the slightest. Which way did those scales lean? In a criminal case, it's beyond a reasonable, and it's got to go real. It's a heavy burden to find someone. Well, and then I'll put one more story in the mix. What if you got somebody that's a liar? And so how can we play fair with a liar? So how do you expose a liar? That's why we have cross-examination. And so they say, psychologists, you can never say the same lie twice the same way. That's why they question and they ask it this way and that way. You hear the other lawyers when they're in trouble, objection, Your Honor, that has already been asked and answered. And I say, excuse me, Your Honor, the really question was this, and the second question is different. and the judge will say, overruled, Mr. Kennedy, ask your question. Because the judges can even feel when someone's trying to be deceptive. One thing you can always stand on, the truth will set you free. That comes out of the Bible. And every man seeks the truth. We have no justice without truth.
Good to know. All right, we're going back to the lines right now. So Steve is on the line with us. Steve, good evening. Do you have a question or a comment for Kevin?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, are you with us, Steve?
Yeah, hey guys. I don't want you to give anything out on here, Mr. Kennedy, but if I call your office, you're very well known and liked in Tennessee, and I was just wondering, if I call your office, can you recommend a lawyer in another town? Do you know lawyers in other cities?
Well, you know, in a lot of different, the Tennessee trial lawyers and the national trial lawyers, we all have conventions and we know others. And the truth is, some lawyers specialize in certain areas, and so that's a common question, and if we can help, we always try to.
Okay, so that's also good to know. So thank you, Steve, for calling in. Back to the lines right now. So Kenneth, you're on the line with us. You're on open line. This is Ask an Expert. The expert is Kevin Kennedy, attorney. So do you have a question or a comment for him? Are you with us, Kenneth?
Oh, yeah, I'm with you, man. I've got a question for the lawyers.
All righty.
Does the fire department is coming out of an entrance of a building, I mean, like a street?
Yep.
And he's coming onto another street. Does he have the right to turn his lights on just to get out in the street and turn them off after he gets where he's going? Why don't he have to wait like anybody else?
Well, that is a good statement. You're pretty sophisticated. In fact, I represented an EMS driver, and I said, hey, the dude is going. Well, the policeman said, no, we followed him. He didn't have an emergency. Well, that driver, I represented him, but he may have talked a little too much. So that is a good question. And they will pull you over. They will check did you have a call or not? Or were you just trying to get through traffic? If they did, you can be charged and you can be convicted of that. So that's why is that, Kevin? It's against public policy. Public policy is we need to save those for people who are in need. And so don't abuse the system. If you do, you probably can get fired over it.
Now, see, that's a great example. Kenneth, I'm so glad you called in this evening and brought that point up, because a lot of people just learned a lot from that one question. Well, if I was a policeman
and there goes the lights, I probably would never even think about it.
Right.
But he watched him, he checked him, and bam, he got him.
That's exactly right.
But he's pretty smart. He got Kevin Kennedy. We got away from that. So
that's it. Thanks again, Kenneth. We appreciate that call. Back to the lines right now. Avery is on the line with us. Avery, do you have a question or a comment?
Yes.
Yes, go right.
Can you tell me about a predatory lender?
Okay. Well, you know, obviously, they used to say about pawn shops all these years, they would come back and say, you know, they're predatory lenders. They'll have people come in, they need money, so they take their property, give very minimum pennies on the dollar, time will run, and they lose their property. You know, there's a lot of talk about all these cash advance places that the interest is way exorbitant, it's usurious, and what that means, it's above the legal rate. We see them come through the court all the time. So I think what I'd take away from that is caveat emptor. Let the buyer beware. Ask the questions, investigate about this company. And you know, I've been in business many years. If I was against the wall and needed money, I would try to get it in a legal way. I'd always try to, and I teach everyone when I go to schools, what's the best thing? Keep your credit up. Now, if your credit's been bad, let's start repairing it. And it gets down to, are you a man or woman of your word? But I've also been there when you say, guys, how are we going to raise the money? This bank won't loan us, so the only place we have is to get it here. Well, if you've got a good deal, and I've been in the business world when you needed it, and you could pay it and still pay that money back. So just let the buyer beware. Check them out, do a little research, ask some people, and then make your best judgment.
All right, Avery, we are glad that you called in this evening, and we're going back to the lines right now. So Jeff is on the line with us. Jeff, good evening. Do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I have a question. Okay. I'm in the market of filing for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and I was wondering, I've had many people say not to file Chapter 7, but go ahead and have someone fix my credit or a credit of a person. I was wondering which is better to do so, and how much would it cost wise?
Excellent, and here's what I'd like to address on this. You can always talk to a bankruptcy lawyer privately. Everybody's situation is different. What does that mean, Kevin? Well, do we have income? They change the laws all the time. So my gut feeling, based on your age, what is our age? What is our income? Are we on disability or not? I really do like a Chapter 7. What is a Chapter 7? It wipes off all your debt, and you have a free, clean slate. Why? Because the public policy knows there comes a time some men can never pay this money back. The only way out is back. So we need to know what your circumstances are. You know, if you let your insurance lapse on your car, or your insurance company said, we didn't get your check in time and we didn't cover you, and there was a car wreck and there's a judgment goes down for $200,000, it's not realistic for an average person to pay that on top of your normal debts. But you could file a bankruptcy and wipe it out and say, I'll never be caught without insurance again. So everybody, we need to talk privately, but I do like Chapter 7. Chapter 11 is where we pay. Anybody can file that at any time, and it's where all your bills are reduced and you can make a payment, and then sometimes you may drag it on a while and then file a Chapter 7.
So in other words, it's best though too, that's the kind of thing you need to discuss in private with your
And the real world, one of my banker friends, I said, well, how many bad loans did you make last year? He said, Kevin, we didn't make any bad loans. We made good loans that went bad. And you say, why? Because some people have a disease they never anticipated. They have to quit their job. And so, or we have a loved one, we've got to quit our job or go to halftime because of this. There's a host of good explanations why, and it's no disgrace. Years ago, there may have been some disgrace with it. It's not a disgrace today.
Good to know. All right, we've got folks on the line with us. We are going to ask you if you can just hold on. We do need to take a short break, but when we return, we will get to those questions. You're watching Open Line.